Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today we're going to talk about Bitcoin and the fact that it was rejected again by the upper logarithmic regression band. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Let's go ahead and jump in. So this is one of those things where we keep saying every single week, are we going to have a decisive move into our peak regression band? And again, if this regression band is new to you, it looks something like this, right? Where you have all the different cycles and us going up into that upper regression band at various phases of the cycle. And so far we look at it and we're like, okay, well, we have not had any weekly closes in the regression band. I do think at some point this market cycle we will. However, in the short term, we don't know, right? I mean, we could always go back down to our bull market support band. We have not visited that band since October. And today, the bull market support band is actually coming in at around 44,200. So it's not even that much further down from the current price. It's just about another $10,000 drop or so, or about 19-20%. Okay, so not a huge drop to get back to the 20-week SMA or the 21-week EMA. Now, one of the reasons why we're looking at this is because we recently crossed below the 8-week moving average, okay? And the only reason we're looking at this is because we don't yet know if we're gonna have a weekly close below it. However, we do know that in the past, when we close below it, we tend to go back down and test the bull market support band, right? Here's a great example of us breaking below it and going back down and testing it. If you go back to the last market cycle, we had several instances where we broke below the 8-week and then we tested the 20. Okay, here again, and then here again. So breaking below the 8-week and then testing the 20-week. So that was fairly common last market cycle. But so far, we do not yet have a weekly close below the 8-week moving average. In order for us to have a weekly close below it, we would need to close the week at below 56,587, and we just started a new week, so we still have a long ways to go before we could decisively say that we closed below that 8-week moving average. So again, so far, look at all the wicks we've had in the upper regression band. 1, 2, 3, 4-ish, 5. Okay, so we keep flirting with that upper regression line, and it sort of remains to be the line in the sand, right? The line in the sand that we are unable to decisively move past and continue up in the short term. Okay, doesn't mean we won't, but you guys see that moving into these upper regression levels, it is difficult. Okay, these upper prices it is difficult, just like it was in the past. But in the past, we took a completely different route to get there, right? Instead of just going straight up like this, we went up and then we came back down and tested the 20, and then up and then back down to test the 20, and then ultimately we were able to just go straight up to the top. Okay, last cycle looked a lot different. Now when we look at this cycle, we say, well, I mean, right now we had several, we flirted with that area several times, but we did not have a decisive move into it. I would argue that time in the grand scheme of the market cycle is still on our side, that we should still theoretically have a ways to move up this market cycle. However, 40% corrections are fairly common in bull markets, and we haven't even had one of those yet. And so we look at the current prices of Bitcoin, and measuring it from, say, these wicks up here down to when we corrected. This was about a 31% drop or so. This one was about 26, I believe. And then so far, this one has been about 16.5%. What's interesting, and maybe you guys have noticed this as well, what I find interesting is that there were more people freaking out over this drop than this drop. And there were more people freaking out about this drop so far than the prior one. So I think to some degree you can sort of see how the new money comes into the space. They buy at a time when it's relatively far extended, and then they can't necessarily stomach the drops in the short term. So as I've always said, I think we are relatively ahead of schedule this cycle. Okay, I think we're ahead of schedule, and that cooling off for a little while is not necessarily a bad thing. Remember, if we go through our little exercise where we draw all the prior cycle bottoms and overlay them, or sorry, if we look at the market cycle ROI and then overlay them for each cycle, and we're not going to take this crazy wick, we'll just take it somewhere up here. That's where we would have been for the first cycle. Okay, we're going to go through this. This would have been the second cycle, okay, right here. So that would have been the second cycle. And we'll color code this so you guys can see it a little bit better. And then we're going to do the same thing for the third cycle. So here's the third cycle, and we're going to overlay that one as well, just somewhere in that area. And then we'll color code that one too. So, you know, we take a step back and you look at this and you say, well, if anything, we're ahead of schedule. And I've always contended that it should look something like this, where I think we can ultimately come up a lot higher. And I've always said, for me, the market cycle peak is not 300K like I know a lot of people are throwing around. For me, it's always been between 1 to 200,000. And I've often contended that if I had to guess, like if you said, okay, pick a number, I'd probably say around 140. This is my guess. Of course, I could be wrong. I've often, I think 120 to 140 is a realistic perspective. But you look at this chart and you say, okay, you had one peak. The next one was when it was further out and diminished, so you had the second peak. The next one was further out and diminishes again, and you had the third peak. Okay, so again, can we extrapolate in a confident way that we're going to do exactly the same thing? No, we can't. We only have 3 data points. Can we use it to say, hey, this provides some perspective that even though we are ahead of schedule now, does not mean we're going to stay ahead of schedule, because again, we were ahead of cycle 2 at one point and did not maintain it. So even if we came back down, which is actually a similar time when the last cycle came back down, even if we came back down and did something like this, you're still potentially looking at a 6-figure Bitcoin, and it also goes in line with this general idea of diminishing returns and lengthening cycles. Okay, it sort of goes along with that idea. Now, I will be the first to say again that lengthening cycle theory is not a popular theory these days, given Bitcoin's crazy price movements over the last several months, and I would agree with you. It means we need to have some flexibility in how we navigate the cycle. If we go straight up and we're going to, what a lot of people are calling for by the end of 2021, like a $300,000 Bitcoin, which a lot of other influencers in the space, basically almost all of them, are calling for a 300 Bitcoin later, a $300,000 Bitcoin later in the year. I think that's too optimistic. Okay, I think that's too optimistic. And I think that we should remain flexible with the idea that, hey, it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world if we kick the can down the road for a little bit. Okay, nothing wrong with that in my opinion. And so I just want people to look at this from a more pragmatic point of view. From a fundamental point of view, everyone wants me to talk about fundamentals. Again, this is the cycle of institutional money so far. Okay, so far there's still a lot more institutions that could come in that haven't. Institutions that want to come in maybe haven't yet because it takes a lot of paperwork. But if the idea is that every institution that wants to buy Bitcoin has already bought it, and we're basically going to drop 80% now, then it calls into question why is everyone who's shouting a $300,000 Bitcoin why would people say calling for a $300,000 Bitcoin by the end of the year? Like, what do they think is going to happen with institutions in January of 2022? Is everyone going to stop buying? So we'll see what happens. I think that people should, again, maintain some flexibility with where we are in the cycle and recognize that drops to the 20-week moving average used to be par for the course, right? People are spoiled this market cycle to some degree because there really haven't been any consequential drops. And there's still, this might not even be one itself. Again, We had a 31% drop and then a 26% drop, and now this one's like a 17% drop so far. There have not been any major consequential drops yet. It doesn't mean there won't be, there just haven't been any yet. And so what worries me is the fact that I see a lot of people getting upset whenever it drops 10 to 15%. I'm like, you haven't seen anything yet, right? I mean, anyone who's been around crypto for a few years know that this is part of the course. And remember, during the down times, right, when the prices are going down, that's when the smart money is buying again, okay? That's when the smart money is buying, not when it's going up and it's up 20x in 13 months. It's typically when it's bearish that the smart money is buying. So I would say that it's important to have some perspective on the matter, and not to necessarily get drawn into this idea that a lot of people are promoting, and that is that it has to immediately go up to $300,000 in the short term, because that's just likely not going to happen. Okay, so have some perspective, recognize where we are in the market cycle, recognize that the returns are diminishing from one cycle to another. That's what history has shown us. Does it mean it has to diminish this cycle? It doesn't mean it has to, but the people that taunt diminishing returns, there's some pretty big influencers that taunt diminishing returns. Again, I say to you, if we were not having diminishing returns, then why are we already not at a $1.8 million Bitcoin, right? Why are we not already at over $1 million? Because if we did not have diminishing returns, we would have been there months ago. We would have already seen a $1 million Bitcoin. It's the fact that we do have diminishing returns that we haven't, and the only reason that it's becoming an argument this cycle is because so far we have stayed on track with the last cycle. So far we have, which again, to my surprise, right? To my surprise, so far we have stayed on track. However, for us to continue to stay on track, Bitcoin, we need to go up another 6x in the next 7 or 8 months. Okay? So Bitcoin, we need to go up another 6x in the next 7 to 8 months for us to not have diminishing returns this market cycle. I don't think it's possible. I would love to be proven wrong on it. I want people to have a different perspective than a $300,000 Bitcoin by the end of the year, because it's most likely not going to happen. We haven't had a cool down phase in a long time. So far, I don't even consider this to be a cool down phase. We're still at 54K. We're still at 55K. I mean, wake me up if we go to 40K or something, right? Wake me up then. Okay, now we've cooled off. So far, this isn't even really relatively that cool. I mean, we're more or less just trending sideways up here over the last couple months. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up. Also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. And also check out the premium list at intothecryptoverse.com. You'll get access to weekly reports and videos, the Telegram alerts channel, the trading view indicators, the Telegram chat room, the risk dashboard, the Into the Cryptoverse app, and more. Make sure you guys check it out. Thank you for tuning in, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.